Welcome to Rec Chat, where students and professionals can chat about all things collegiate recreation. I'm your host, Rochelle Harvey, coming to you from American University in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining me today. I'd also like to give a big thank you to Earl Cabellon and Will Moore for helping plan today's Google Hangout. As always, thank you to NERSA, Leaders in Collegiate Recreation, for marketing today's Google Hangout. An early announcement, just make sure that you're a part of the show. Ask questions by commenting on the YouTube page or by tweeting at us. So to start things off, we would like to ask our guests, Ed Cabellon and Scott Flickinger, to give us a brief intro on who you are and how you got to this point in your life.
Can you hear me? Okay, I hear you. Okay. So my name is Ed Cabellon, and I am the assistant to the vice president of student affairs at Bridgewater State University, and I've been in this role now for about 1.5 years. I was formerly the director of our student union for about 5.5 years. Before that, I worked at Tufts University, where I did student activities. I did Greek life, orientation, and student union work at Tufts. Prior to that, I was at Central Connecticut State University, where I did my graduate work, and the year before that, I was at the University of New Hampshire as a hall director. So I've been in the field for about 18 years and had progressive experience and have moved up into our division's leadership team. I got my master's degree at Central Connecticut in education leadership, and I'm currently in the final stages of earning my doctorate in educational leadership from Johnson & Wales University in Providence, Rhode Island. So that's a bit about me.
Suppose I'll go next. My name is Scott Flickinger. I am the director of intramural sports at Cornell University. I just started here in July of 2015. Before that, I was the assistant manager of intramurals and club sports at Boston University. Prior to that, I was the program coordinator of intramurals and facilities. And before that, was at Bucknell University. So I've kind of been around the block too in terms of campus recreation. I'm actually a latecomer to campus recreation in that I didn't really get my start until right around my early 20s. Before that, I like to think of this as my second life. Before that, I was a behavior management specialist at a nonprofit organization. My degrees are in social behavioral sciences, so that's kind of a unique path to tread on your way to campus recreation. So I'm here now. I've been in the field since about 2004 as a professional, and I love every second of it. So that's me in a nutshell.
Great, thanks so much. Could you please give us a brief definition of digital technology and how you view it? Ed, if you could go ahead for us.
Sure. So for me, in my dissertation work, I had to define digital technology because, as you can imagine, that term brings about a lot of different things for different people depending on who you talk to. For me, and for the research I've been doing, digital technology provides three functions: access, exchange, and transmission. And so when you're looking at what we do with digital technology, those three things are what we look at that encompasses what digital technology does. My dissertation right now is looking at a 10-year historical analysis from 2005 to 2015 of how student affairs administrators broadly have used digital technology in their work. And I'm in the middle of analyzing my data, which is like really fun time because I actually get to see, what the data is showing. And I'll share a little bit with this audience today as I, begin to start writing my last 2 chapters. One thing that's been really interesting is that, I think we see digital technology and communication in the same breath. I think we interchange the two topics when they're really two different things. So when you hear technology, some people assume social media, and email and things like that. But the truth is that technology is just, one of those things that some folks have referred to as a tool. I describe it more as an instrument. So digital technology to me is an instrument because when you look at what you have to do for an instrument in terms of practice, time on task, and the fact that you have to play with a lot of other instruments to make some really cool music, that's what technology is today for us when you look at the whole spectrum of what we can do with technology. So it's not simply a tool to fix a problem or to make us more efficient, but it is what we use to, I think, make our work more meaningful. It gives our work more meaning. And so in a time where we're still trying to figure that out, defining technology in that way for me has helped frame it for our colleagues in student affairs, and beyond.
Great, thanks, Ed. Scott, could you give us your insight?
Well, Ed pretty much nails it. In terms of digital technology in itself, he describes it perfectly as an instrument. And it's not just necessarily, like he said, social media. It's many different programs and items that we use almost daily, not with just our computer, but just all sorts of items that have progressed over time to help us create a better environment for whatever purpose we're trying to fulfill. So whether it be campus recreation, student development, professional development, we've had these tools develop over the years, and we'll talk about some of these later, where it's been able to help us collaborate more efficiently in terms of end results. So I really can't top what Ed has said because, again, doing a dissertation on it, I am just a Twitter king. So I'm going to default to him on this one. He has a much better description, but I do agree completely with what he says in terms of using it as, and it will take time for us to get it more to a point where it will fulfill our needs fully. But in the meantime, we have so many different avenues and so many different instruments that we can try and create this perfect song in terms of the way we use it to collaborate and to educate.
Great, thanks so much, Scott. So because you just said you're the Twitter king, maybe you could lead off with our next question. How can digital technology be utilized to create a personal brand?
So when I first got onto social media, and this was introduced to me by a student at Ithaca College quite a few years ago, it was an interesting avenue to go down. So you essentially have this outlet to speak to people, and not just to your colleagues, but to all sorts of people. So the first thing you really want to think of is, what am I going to put out there? What am I going to show everybody in terms of what I'm about, what my personal statement is? And that's something that you got to really think about before you get into social media or get into technology. What is the message you're going to get across that are viewing whatever you are doing? So it took me a few years. It took me some time to develop what I wanted to do with it, what avenues I wanted to go down. There was definitely some bumps and some hiccups in there, but I kind of finally figured out what I wanted to do. One of the most important things I feel that when you're creating a personal brand is that you're honest, and that is you are creating an outlet for people to see what you're really like. So it's really tough to go out there, put out kind of this facade of who you are, and then when people meet you in real life, which I've come to do, they're like, oh, you're nothing like what you put yourself out there for. So I feel like honesty is probably the most important part of personal brand. If you have this honesty, there are going to be individual companies out there. There's going to be, in terms of campus recreation, there's going to be different recreational to your personal brand and say, is this the individual that's going to fit within our department, especially if you're looking for a job or looking for some way to define your career. They're going to look at you and say, all right, we see what's being put out there. Does this align with what we believe in? So I think one of the most important things is being honest, putting yourself out there with an honest scope, and having a little bit of fun with it. For those of you who follow my Twitter account, which it's listed right there, all right, and you can totally follow. It's no pressure or anything. I mean, it's only probably the smartest thing you can possibly do. But anyways, if you take a look at the brand I'm putting out there, it's very similar to how I interact in real life. So when people come up to you and say, "Oh, you're that guy," they're like, "Oh, it totally makes sense. We understand that." And I like that, and I like to see that out there. Like, okay, you're funny, or you try to be funny, and I try. I try really hard. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you definitely put yourself out there, and they see that and say, "Okay, that's great." And it's also finding too your niche as well. So in experimenting with this Twitter accounts, with Instagram accounts, with social media, with technology, I'm taking a look at, all right, where do I fit in? How do I fit into this gigantic digital technology puzzle, right? And in the beginning, I didn't know where I fit in. I didn't know how to make this work. After a while, I thought, well, I could use this for NERFs purposes, but in what way? I like to officiate. It's part of who I am in terms of intramural sports. So I started putting out questions in terms of officiating things that student officials might see. And it kind of developed after that. I kind of got into brand management after that, went to some National Championship Series events, and started to live tweet that, and it kind of caught on. It's like, I enjoy this. I really have fun with it. This is something I can identify with, and people started to identify with it too. So I kind of found my niche then in terms of what I want to use that for and how I want to get across to other individuals working in social media. So that is basically my kind of 2 cents on how to establish your own personal brand. Find your niche, be honest.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. What about you, Ed?
So I agree with Scott. I think he has a great foundation for what he's doing with his personal brand. I think it's great. I would also add that, depending on what you're doing with your professional career, there's going to come a point where you have to think about how your digital communication choices are going to affect your future work opportunities, for good or for bad, right? So when at orientation every year, I give a talk to the freshmen about digital identity. If you really think about it, those of us of a certain age, didn't have to worry about the impact of how technology, could affect us negatively and positively. I could go to parties in the 90s, yes, I'm that old, yeah, where I didn't have to worry about what people could take a picture of me or say things that I didn't realize, right? And so I think as collegiate educators, administrators, I think we have a larger responsibility, in the world in terms of our work to be good role models online for our students, because they don't have anyone to look up to in this way. They're not learning about social media in school per se. There's not a course that they're taking. Even our students, unless they're in a comm or marketing major, they're maybe getting like a how to use social media like 101 kind of a thing. But when you think about your own identity development and how you want to be perceived online, folks are Googling each other nowadays. They're looking each other up on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, as they meet them, whether it's conferences or whatever. So, something I tell my students at orientation is there's this great book by Eric Qualman. He just put it out last year in partnership with ACPA called What Happens on Campus Stays on YouTube. And it's a great book for students, for professionals who really want to get into the meat of how to build a digital identity professionally. And there's 3 things that I typically talk about. There's a section called the new rules of reputation, right? So reputation management is almost as critical as your credit report, because both have implications in all your future endeavors. So consider, the fact that, you got to know why you're on it, right? So Simon Sinek's work on Start With Why. If you don't know Simon Sinek, you should get on Simon Sinek. He's a great author. And so, if you don't know your why you're using social media beyond a personal construct, and you work in campus recreation or student affairs or related educational field, especially if you work for a state institution, you have in my opinion, a greater responsibility to be careful and be more mindful of what you share, because it does reflect on your employer, and if you're connected with students, it reflects on, on how they see you as well. So why are you on? I also think we need to be mindful of, in the world we live in, how do we challenge and support each other virtually, and be that role model for our students. So providing information for them, sharing folks, making connections online. And then the third thing speaks to something that Scott talked about, which was being, I say, genuine online. And I think there's a difference between being genuine and authentic. I think those two words get thrown around a lot in our field, especially online, authenticity and genuineness. So to me, authenticity means that you're who you are, regardless of the environment that you're speaking in, right? So kids are probably the most authentic creatures that we have in our world, right? Because my daughters and other kids their ages, if you ask them a question, they're going to tell you what they think, regardless of what of the context in which they're talking about it, right? But if you're being genuine, it means that you're still who you are, but you're respectful of the environment. So when you're in an online space, that's a public space. Like, don't get it twisted that you can just say whatever you want. There's freedom of speech in our country, but there's no such thing as freedom of speech without consequence. So you got to remember that you can say whatever you want, but you got to be careful, because there's not a lot of context to be able to pull out what you say. That tweet could be totally misconstrued, or that Facebook post without the proper emojis or without the proper context might be taken a different way. So we have to be really mindful of that, because we do have a greater responsibility. So one tip I would give rec professionals is that if you're sharing about something you're doing regarding your work, publicly share that on Facebook and Twitter. Don't just share what you're doing on Facebook just to your friends and family. That's not going to do anything. But if you make those public, now they can be searched. Your students who are following you might be able to see those posts. If you decide not to friend them, but they're following you, they can see those public posts. And it's a great way to build your university's brand, because you as a staff member are now sharing all the great work that you're doing. And there's no better people to tell our stories than ourselves. So in terms of personal brand, professional brand, I think those things are going to start bleeding into not only the things we do for ourselves professionally, but how we represent our respective institutions.
Great, thanks so much. Scott, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I do want to piggyback off something Ed had talked about, and that is in terms of the things you put out there, the content you generate, especially for students. Ed brought up a great point, and that is you have to be careful sometimes what you put out there, just because of the context in which it's put out, things that are said, and like Ed said, freedom of speech is a great thing, but there's not a 100% total. You can't claim it all the time. Like, for example, you can't yell fire in a large public building, because that causes chaos, right? And that will lead you to get arrested. That kind of goes the same way for the content that you put out there. And once it's out there, privacy, and we'll get into privacy a little bit, not everything is private, right? Even though we have some programs where it says, oh, your privacy is guaranteed, it's not as private as you think it is. One great example about putting content out there and it lasting for a very long time, and I mean long time. The internet's been around for longer than a lot of the college students that you see today. It's been out there for quite some time. My avatar for Twitter is a picture scanned back when I was a sophomore in college in 1996. I Googled it one day when I first made my Twitter account, and it was still on the internet, literally almost 10 years later, 10, 15 years later. So if you think about that, today's students really don't have that scope of how long the internet's been around, because it's always been around for them, and in terms of them being using it and then starting their personal brand, they've only really started their personal brand for about 3, 4, 5 years. I created a sophomore in college right now. It's studying philosophy, by the way, too. That's its major. So this picture that I created almost 20 years ago is still around. So again, be careful what you put out there, because it will be around. It will be around for a very long time.
Thanks, Scott. Ed, could you go ahead and tell us how digital technologies help students prepare for their future careers?
Sure. I think that when you look at the scope of digital tech communication tools that we have at our disposal, we have to start, with mobile technology and how we construct content using our mobile devices. And as students, I think they spend most of their time on their mobile device. I think they may or may not have a laptop or a tablet as well. The research says that they do, but I think they create most of their content for social media, on their phone. So I think students need to be thinking about, okay, so who is it that I want to connect with if I choose to start using social networks in a professional construct or an educational construct, and not just a social construct. Students ask me all the time, should I make a separate Facebook, should I make a separate Twitter, should I make a separate LinkedIn or whatever? And I think you have to decide that for yourself because no one's going to manage those channels besides you. I went at it a long time ago thinking I'm going to be who I'm going to be, but I'm going to be a little more professional in my social networks and be a little bit less opinionated on various things because there'll be a time and place for all of that, of course, but because, again, I work for a public institution in higher education in Massachusetts, my stance is that I have a bigger responsibility. So all of my social media accounts are public. They're Ed Cabellon, pretty much branded throughout. And I think students should start thinking about, okay, have I written a 250-word bio about who I am, what I want to accomplish, and who I want to meet through social networks? Then a 100-word bio that would be more succinct to support that 250-word bio, and then 160 to 180 character tweet, who am I in a tweet size bite, right? Because you just never know who you're going to meet and what kind of opportunities you're going to have when you network with people. So those three areas, 250-word bio, 100-word bio, and 160 character size tweet are what you eventually will fill in a LinkedIn account, on a Twitter bio, or on on Facebook to really start attracting who are you trying to connect with. I also tell students that at some point you're going to have to unfriend and unfollow the people who don't add value to your network, because really as you become a junior and senior and really begin to explore career paths and work with career services on your campus or whomever you're using to help you find your job or internship or grad assistantship or whatever you end up doing, the first thing they're going to do is ask you, well, where's your cover letter and resume, and oh, by the way, what do you look like online, right? It's pretty standard now, and more companies are utilizing social network data to inform them on the kind of decisions they're going to make on candidates. And when you think about the competitive nature of every job market that's out there now and how difficult it is to land great jobs because of how great the talent pool is, being mindful of your digital identity and presenting yourself really well online will make you rise above those candidates who have probably similar experiences to you. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can create a website for yourself, a blog. About.me is a great free service that allows you to create an electronic portfolio of some of your work. But I think students need to be very mindful and in many cases coached on how to do this, because it's hard to do that. So whether they go to their career services area and talk with the folks there, certainly if students want to reach out to me, I'm happy to send them resources that might get them started. But there is power in using social networks to land your next opportunity, because if you're only using it for social reasons to this point, then you're missing you're missing the boat on opportunities. And finally, I would just add that I think we need to move away from fear factor education with students, like the whole notion of, because they grew up, my friend Josie Alquist, Dr. Josie Alquist, who just finished her dissertation this year, her research is in student leadership. Digital student leadership, and her findings were about the fact that we have to move away from the idea of fear in educating our students around digital, because they grew up in the time where it was like, be careful of who you are, like that spook factor of who's behind that computer, and AIM instant messaging, and it was always fear, like don't trust who those people are online, it could be a predator, and rightfully so, and that still continues today. But I think as educators, we should be talking about the positive possibilities of using digital communication and digital technology tools, not just scaring them to death like, you should really delete that post on Facebook. It's like, I think we can move beyond that now. I think we can be a little more sophisticated, but we have to have our crap together, because we have those conversations until we take a selfie of our own digital identity and go, okay, now that I'm good, now I can help my students.
Great. Thanks so much, Ed. What about you, Scott?
Well, once again, Ed hits it pretty much on the head. You have to take advantage of this opportunity right now in terms of creating your digital brand and using it for your future endeavor. So creating that LinkedIn account and making sure that you're getting the right message out on your social media accounts, as well as your as well as any type of online activity that you perform. Ed's nailed it in terms of the individuals that you hitch your wagon to, especially in terms of digital media and social media as well. Companies and campus rec departments take a look at that kind of thing, and they see who you're hitching your wagon to. They take a look at what you're putting out there, and they will say, well, does that match what we really want? Does that jive with our mission and value statements? Is this individual going to advance what we're trying to do? And they may not know anything about you personally. That's usually, for a lot of companies and a lot of departments, your social media is the first thing they see. They'll get your resume and they'll say, we're interested in this person. I wonder what this person says. That's just the way it is right now. With people having Twitter accounts, Facebook accounts, Instagram accounts, people are curious, right? They want to figure out the person before they actually meet the person. They want to meet the person before they meet the person. So in a lot of ways, when we say when you go in for that interview, the first 5 minutes are the most important. It's not the first 5 minutes anymore. It's what you're putting out there before you get to the interview. That's really important now, because a lot of companies and a lot of departments take a look at that and say, all right, this person is putting out content that really doesn't correspond with what we're trying to get done. So you might miss out on an opportunity because of the content that you're putting out. So you got to be mindful of what you are putting out, making sure that you're putting out content, especially if you're going for a job, that really says something and motivates companies to say, you know what, we really like that. We like that personal brand out there. We like what we see. We want that person on board. I think that's the person we want to bring in for an interview.
All right, thanks so much, Scott. So we have a question from Parker Anderson. He would like to know, can you ever be yourself on social media, and where does that line stand? What is too much?
Go ahead, Scott.
Can you be yourself? Absolutely. Yes, you can be yourself. I am myself a lot. However, I do keep in mind that once I am out in cyberspace, which seems all scary like Ed had said before, and it's actually really not, it's actually a great place if you, again, are mindful of what you're putting out there. So I can be my goofy self all I want, and I can put stuff out there, but I am a professional, loosely, and I do my best in terms of putting out what I feel is my authentic and unique content that stays honest to my brand, but at the same time stays professional and stays relevant and stays in bounds. So, and I might have sometimes where I kind of push the envelope a little bit, and I realize that, and sometimes that's a risk I'm willing to take if I want to get a point across or I'm trying to draw attention to something. That can be a great thing if you're willing to push the envelope on some things in terms of what your brand looks like, or talking about certain topics, or getting certain conversations going in terms of social media. But you do have to remember, too, that if you push the boundary too far, that might cost you later. So you can absolutely be yourself. You can be that person you feel. You can be that person you feel you are in real life online. You just have to remember that in your life, in quote real life, you should have too in terms of your social media presence. One of the things I've always been taught is the grandma rule, which is if I put something out there and my grandmother reads it, would she approve of it? Would it make her upset? You know, it's kind of a good guideline to go with, but you can't really do that anymore because times are changing, subjects are changing, conversations are changing, so it's okay to kind of push that limit a little bit, but you do have to be aware of what you are putting out there.
Awesome, great, thanks so much. So, Ed, could you go ahead and start us with how can digital technology be used to create a collaborative learning environment?
Yeah, so in terms of collaborative learning, I think digital technology has a great place for that in our field, particularly in recreation. So one thing I would recommend to colleagues is if you haven't had it, so when you think of your training seminars and when you look at how you train your students, I'm going to guess, and it may be, maybe I'm wrong, but at some point I'm sure you bring them all in and present some PowerPoint presentation, maybe 2 or 3, about a variety of topics that are important to your facilities, to your operational, to how your operations are run, safety. I'm sure there's a lot because as a former student center director, we ran those similar trainings. What I would challenge folks to think about is how, number one, how do we deliver that content ahead of time so that when you bring students together, you're not spending time having them sit down and listen to you, but you're actually engaging them in activities that you know, make them actualize the learning that you're asking them to do. So when I was director of the campus center, we would send our PowerPoints and prezis and keynote slides to our students and put them in our learning management system as a course ahead of time. So we built, using, you know, our folks in IT, we built a course in Blackboard and Moodle. I don't know, you know, depending on what campus you're at, you may use one or the other or something else I'm not naming right now. But imagine sending that ahead of time to your students and then sending them a pretest along with it, you know, so that you can measure what they're learning from the training, right? Because if we're training just to check off a box, then we're not really training. What we're doing is we're checking off a box to say that you did it. And that's not really what I think you all want to do. I think you really want to make sure your students know the content of what you're trying to teach them, so that they can become the best employees and the best students that, you know, that they can be for you. So we would send them a pretest ahead of training, have them watch the videos, watch the slides, and then take a post-test after to decide whether they learned anything or not. And that data would help inform us on what we had to do in person with them. So gone were the days for us of sending out, of having them come to training for 3 to 4 days where half of it was sitting in front of, you know, a lecture hall where one of us and our staff was lecturing to them. You know, we saved money, we cut our training in half and spent, you know, 2 days solid on team building, on situational pieces, you know, and working with our partners, whether it was campus police or others across campus, to know other pieces of information that might have been important. And what's great about putting your content online, whether it's through a learning management system or on YouTube or on you know, a variety of delivery systems, if you hire staff mid-semester or along the way, they can jump right in and learn that without you having to sit down and teach them how to do that. You know, and we've developed in our division, as a divisional resource, a video team that records all of our training. So, you know, whether you, like, you know, right now this Google Hangout's being recorded, so folks who couldn't be here today can watch it later and get whatever they needed out of it. Same thing for your division. So as a recreation division, imagine if you, when you provided in-services for your students or your professional staff, that you recorded it, you got the permission of the presenter to record it, of course, and then if folks couldn't make it for legitimate reasons, like they were working or they had other things happening with class and whatnot, then they can still be a part of the training without having to feel like they missed out. And so I think getting that woven into our practice, like this is a step in our planning when we plan professional development or training, that's something that we do, because then we're utilizing technology in a way to make our lives a little bit more efficient, and it allows for students to learn in a way that they're used to. They're a YouTube generation. They're used to watching YouTube videos to get their information. And I'd rather spend my time with the students and with the staff in person, you know, really solving problems, running through some scenarios that have happened in the past and let them talk to each other about it. I think that's one way we can start using technology a little bit better, because I I think our training is still a little bit outdated. And the other thing I will share on top of that training is that our slides need to be better. I think if we do end up presenting in front of students, that we need to move away by death by PowerPoint. I think our colleagues need to be knowledgeable of the content they're presenting, and they shouldn't need to read off a slide to teach. I think they should know it and use image-based slides to present that content. If you've ever seen me present, well, if you're going to be at NERSA, in the spring you'll see me present because I'll be at NERSA, at the annual conference, and you'll see all of my slides are all image-based, very little words. And what's great about it is that it's engaging, it's visual. We learn best by visually learning, by looking at content data in the visual way. There's 2 books I'd recommend if you wanted to get better at that. Slideology is a book, and then Presentation Zen is another book that I would recommend if folks can put that out on the Twitter feed. Those 2 books will help you absolutely become a better presenter should you still have to present things in person for your students.
Great, thanks, Ed. So, Scott, I have a question for you from Southern New Hampshire University. Could you talk about whether or not you find digital technology to be a distraction?
It's all going to depend upon how much energy you're willing to invest in digital technology and social media. When I first got into this, I didn't realize what I was getting into in terms of the brand I was trying to build. Like I said, this was introduced to me. I found so many avenues, and I got so excited in terms of what can I put out there? What can I do? What can I do to make content that people will enjoy, content that people will learn from? It's grown quite a bit, and in terms of the energy I have to put forth, I've realized now that it takes a lot of energy to put that out there. Similarly with recreation sports and campus recreation departments as well, you have to decide how much you're willing to invest in terms of putting out social media and digital technology in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. There are a lot of departments that have marketing. They have marketing sectors where they do the marketing for them. All you have to do is give them the content. That's their sole purpose, is to put out marketing to increase awareness of the technologies that you have available to participants in your intramural sports leagues, coming through your fitness centers, that kind of thing. A lot of places don't have that, and it's basically the professionals without a marketing sector saying, okay, I gotta do this myself. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And realizing that you're going to have to invest a lot of time if you want the amount of followers you want, if you want the amount of people you're trying to reach. Some people, put all their eggs in this basket and say, all right, the way we're going to go is social media. We're going to go Instagram this out. We're going to go Snapchat. We're going to go Twitter. We're going to go all out. And they find that they're not reaching the amount of people they're trying to reach, and that's because they kind of don't realize that it's a supplement. It's supplemental. It's another avenue for you to go out and get followers or get people aware of what you're trying to do in terms of your recreation department or in terms of what programming you're trying to put out there. So realizing that you're going to have to put in a lot of energy and a lot of time to this is the number one thing. If you assess this and say, I don't know if we can put the energy or time into this to make it a successful campaign, then it's probably going to be more of a distraction to you than it will be a boon, because now you're spending all your time trying to figure out, well, what are we trying to do? How are we trying to get this out? Do I need to push this social media outlet? Do I need to push that social media outlet? What are we trying to push out there? How are we trying to get followers? How are we going to try and get people to figure out, hey, come to our fitness center or come do our recreational sports programming? And it can be tough. It can be very difficult, and you have to make that assessment. Sometimes sometimes you'll try it, and sometimes you'll have a lukewarm result, or you'll get individuals that say, well, I'm not sure if we should follow this, is this worth my time? And then you really have to go back and assess, do I have to fish here and try and push this more, or do I have to cut bait and say, you know what, that's not the avenue we can do because it's taking up too much of our time, it's taking up too much of our effort. We have to go and evaluate and do something else. So the answer, the long way around, the short answer is it can be a distraction if you don't have the energy and the time investment for it. And that's something that you have to assess as a department. It's something you have to get together and say, okay, we have to sit down and figure out, is incorporating a Facebook page, is incorporating a Twitter account, an Instagram account, is incorporating this digital technology worth our while? Because you have to put the energy and the effort into it to not just put it out there, but to keep it up as well. You have to keep it modern. You have to keep it fresh. The way our constituents are, particularly at Cornell University and at other universities out there as well, we have to figure that students want new content constantly. There's this now. We need it. We need this information instantaneously, and we need it updated immediately. Remember back 10 years ago when email was the now thing, and now email is considered slow. And it's because now we've got technologies that are even faster, and that is texting. We've got Instagram, we've got Twitter, things that catch our attention immediately. So not only do you have to figure out, do you have the time, energy to do it, but can you keep up with it? And can you keep up with the changing times? And can you keep the content fresh and new so that people can stay interested?
Great. Thanks so much, Scott.
Hey, Rochelle, can I just interrupt real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to add to that because I think it goes back. So the question was, can digital technology be a distraction? I think it's a distraction if folks don't know why they're using it. You can have all the energy and stuff in the world, but it starts with why. You know, when you look at how you spend your time and money, those are your priorities because you've decided to make that a priority. So you have to figure out why you all want to use it. You can't just kind of use it. It just can't be this checkbox. Again, we operate in this in higher ed quite a bit. Like, yep, we use it. We use social media. Yep, we have a Facebook. Yep, I have a Twitter. Like, it's not enough anymore, and you have to figure out why. If you can't articulate why you're using it, then I would take a step back, and when you're ready, when you and your staff are ready to answer that why question deeply, then we can talk about, okay, now how do you not make it it won't be a distraction. That word that describes the technology already connotates this, it's distracting, I have other things I need to do, and you're right, you probably do. But if you're dealing with this generation of students, you know, that's sort of the way of the world, and we have to be able to articulate that why. So I'm sorry, I just want to get that in there.
No, that's great. Thank you. So what types of digital technology do you feel are most important for your students to be fluent in?
Is that for me or for Scott?
How about you, Ed?
Okay. So there's a level of fluency, if you look at literacy versus fluency in terms of technology education, it's much like learning a new language, right? So to be fluent in digital technology, I think folks, number one, need to know how to use the internet. And I know that sounds really odd for me to say, but based on the literature, students simply don't know how to use the internet. They know how to use social networks. They know how to communicate with each other digitally over a variety of networks. But if you were to put them in front of a Google search engine and challenge them to find things, and then not only find things, but critically look at if the content is actually good content, I think that's where we need to start teaching our students. How do you determine what's good content and what's crap content, right? Because there's a lot of crap out there, a lot of crap. People put up crap all the time. So understanding the nuances of Google searches. How do you Google search within a location-based area? How do you Google specific things using search operator and parameter things? So you have to know how to use you have to go beyond Googling a question. Like, I don't even Google questions anymore. I tweet questions because that actually gives me a better response than Google, which is operating on a search, on a page rank response kind of a thing, So number one, I think students need to be good at learning how to utilize the World Wide Web, the internet, beyond the Google pieces, okay? And then the second thing I would challenge them to do is understand how they have utilized their mobile phones to not only text each other, message each other, but what else are they using their mobile phones for? So I would challenge, in order to be fluent in this, look at the apps they have on their phone and why do they have those apps on their phone. Many of us have apps we've used once and kept on. So why do those things stay on? But the apps often reflect our own use of the tools. So I think getting to know why you're using that mobile phone, I'm going to guess it's for messaging, and that's really it's a communication device. That's what the smartphone has become. But I know some students who are really good at updating, if it's academic work or professional work. They've figured out a way to do that. And then the third thing I would say is, in order to be fluent in technology, they have to understand their own identity. So it goes back again to, how does the internet see me? Because that is going to carry a lot more weight in terms of the digital identity component as in their future goals, and how they can articulate that to a future employer. So, as an example for seniors, if I were to meet you for the first time and I Googled you with your name in quotation marks, what would I find? Why would it be up there? And would you be able to talk to, well, there's a lot of Ed Cabellons in the world, I happen to be the first one, or here's why those pictures that you may have found out there. So you want to be able to be ahead of that curve. And so again, that goes back to understanding how to use the internet, internet search, and discerning good information. So that's what I would say to start.
Great, thank you so much. What about you, Scott?
Hits a lot of good points. I would additionally say that in terms of campus recreation, you should also be fluent in the campus recreation programs that we tend to utilize. For example, in intramural sports, most of us, if not almost all of us, are using some type of scheduling program like Sportific or IM leagues. So you need to be fluent in those items as well, because if you are looking for a job outside of campus, once you become, once you get your GA position all done over with, and you're looking for that entry-level position, some of the first things they're going to say is, well, are you proficient in these following applications or in these programs? Can you do IM leagues? Can you do VSI? Can you do Fusion? And knowing those programs are going to help you out immensely, because those are the programs specific to the jobs we do in terms of campus recreation. So not only knowing how to Google for information, knowing what you're putting out there and how to use the internet, but also, and the applications on your phone, but also knowing how to use the specific programs that we find in campus recreation, knowing those to make yourself more marketable right away. A lot of people are going to find that the more of these programs that they know fluently, the better chance they have at being successful at finding a position and improving whatever they're working on in said position.
Great, thanks so much, Scott. So the next question is, will digital technologies such as Fitbit, Apple Watch, heart rate monitors, fitness trackers, and applications progress to a point where they can be incorporated into recreational and student programming? Earl, why don't you go ahead, or I'm sorry, not Earl, Ed, why don't you go ahead and start off?
Well, he's definitely the better looking Cabellon, so I would definitely go there. So I would say, I think wearable technology is still so new and infant in terms of higher ed application. It's hard to say that there's going to be any traction with these tools. I think a bigger question would be, how have we used big data on our own campuses to look at how students are well and really tracking their well-being? I know some campuses that have data stream initiatives that are pulling in data from multiple sources, including card swipe, including not just how many times are they entering the rec center or the library or whatever, but if students are self-disclosing things on apps such as Nike Running, or others that are similar, the Fitbit pieces, I think you could get into some of that if rec centers wanted to do a Fitbit challenge and create a Fitbit account that you could connect to, and then that was a challenge thing. I think you can do that. The challenge is it's a third-party software. It's hard to integrate into existing legacy systems like Banner or DataTel, depending on your campus. So I think there's definitely potential there. It's just so new, and how really the real question is going to be, how will it interface with existing systems to extract that data? When it's third party, it's hard to say that whose data it is. You get into that kind of battle, and do you want to, depending on what you're trying to do. So it may be better to create a challenge, using your own websites and having people self-report things that way, versus using wearable devices to really be the central point for collecting that data. You want to collect the data yourselves. You don't want a third party or a third party app or device doing it for you. Now, if a recreational facility somewhere across the country developed that for their students, I think that would be so innovative. And if there is a campus that has already IT development that could do that, that would be a great exploration of how to utilize campus recreation, wellness education, and gamification, if you will, to get students involved in not only the intramural component, but now they're tracking their wellness, what they're eating, the things that fitness trackers are doing. So
Great, thanks so much, Ed. Scott?
I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of this, and I think right now where you're seeing this the most is in the fitness component, the personal training component. You're starting to see a lot of personal trainers in recreational departments using a lot of this technology to help their clients in terms of making them more aware of their health and wellness. You see people going around with Fitbits. You see people with digital pedometers. You even see people. I'll go and do a workout, and I'll see people with their iPhones out or their smartphones out or laptops out, looking at instructors on YouTube clips, or even FaceTiming in order to get their workouts in or to do certain exercises correctly. So I think we've got a foothold in terms of it being used in having it being used in campus recreation, and it's starting in the fitness component. In terms of how it's going to go further, that's again going to depend on a lot, like Ed said, on the compatibility of those on existing databases. So I think we've got a great start. I think that it's slowly coming along. But again, until we get some upgrades within a lot of universities, and there's a lot of places that are still behind the times, and again, third-party technologies evolve a lot faster than our universities. I think a lot of you can attest to that. You'll come in, you'll be like, why are we still using technology from the 80s and 90s when we're 30 years ahead, when we've got systems where you can tap your ID and the door opens, or you can tap a system and it counts your meals for you, that kind of thing. So it's coming along, but again, when the colleges catch up to the technology, then I think the technology will be a more integrated part into our programming.
Great, thanks so much. So we have a question from Wreck-It. How effective do you think social media is for reaching students with pertinent intramural information versus other platforms? This is for Ed.
So I want to burst a bubble, a social media myth bubble for folks on the call or those who are watching in the recording. If you're only posting content on Facebook and Twitter and hoping that your followers see it, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be sadly disappointed, because less than 5% of your followers will actually see that content. The truth about social media today is that you have to pay to get views. So if you're not doing paid social media ads, then you're not really maximizing the power of social media anymore. You have to boost each of your ads in Facebook and Twitter, which means you need to know how to create imaging and imagery that people get their attention, because they won't look at text, they'll look at images. Because you and I mean, we all know that when you scroll your feed, the things that pop out are videos and images, right? So if you're not doing that as part of your social media communication plan, then students aren't going to see any messages you're putting out there. Again, it's a checkbox mentality. We need to go beyond that and start investing some money, and it doesn't take a lot of money. And what I like about boosted social media ads is that it gives you data to find out if the people who you're targeting actually saw it and what to do the next time you want to do that similar campaign. And so we invested some of our resources. We took away printing costs and moved them into the digital. And depending on the event, we'll boost some things. And you can target it very specifically. Facebook and Twitter are very sophisticated. You can target it within a certain mile radius of campus, where people have self-identified that they're a student at your institution or related to your institution, and use keywords that people might be talking about as part of their Twitter feeds that then would pop up. So if you're using social media organically, you're not going to get the kind of views that you're expecting and hoping. It's just not there today. So I just want to make sure I said that.
All right, thanks so much. So our final question in the last 5 minutes. Could the use of digital technology in student development or programming be considered intrusive or an invasion of privacy? Ed, do you want to start briefly and then we can switch over to Scott?
Say that again. That's an interesting question.
Could the use of digital technology in student development or programming be considered to be intrusive or an invasion of privacy?
Sure. I think it could be, depending on your understanding of digital technology tools. When we use digital technology, it's our choice to do it. No one's forcing us to use these technologies. They exist. People have a choice to use them, and if you don't want to use them, you don't have to. So I don't think so. Again, if you know your why and you understand the purpose behind what you're doing in terms of student development, identity development for students, training, and you know why, and you have a clear why, you can articulate that, I don't think there's going to be any intrusive. Students may initially feel that way because they're not used to using it in that way. So you have to educate them, saying you're entering a world where you're in an educational environment, we're trying to teach you, we're going to use these platforms to heighten your awareness of these tools, and we're going to teach you some things that you're going to need, so when you graduate, you're going to be a better prepared candidate for the job. So I think initially you might get some resistance from students who don't want to do it, but certainly there's a lot of things that we did in college growing up that we didn't like, but it made us better for it at the end of the day. So again, do you know your why? If you do, then I think it wouldn't be a problem.
Great, thanks so much. Scott, do you have any feedback?
I agree with Ed. We have to educate students and our users in terms of the platforms we're using, in terms of why we're using it, and the reason why colleges are using these platforms. Example I like to give is with IM Leaks, there's an option for students or our participants to not receive messages from the admin account, even though these messages might be important in terms of, hey, we had a cancellation, or hey, we've had this. It's because they feel, you know what, I don't want to get these messages all the time, or this is annoying me. But educating those folks and saying, look, this is how we communicate with our participants. This is the reason why we have you guys make sure you put in your email accounts as well as your phone numbers, texting information. We know we're not going to abuse this. We're trying not to abuse this privilege. At the same time, we want to get you this information instantaneously, and we're putting that out there, or we're having you do this because we want to make sure you get this information immediately so you can tell your teams, hey, we've got a cancellation tonight, or hey, our game time has changed. We got to make sure to let the team know. So like Ed said, making sure we educate people and saying, here's why we're doing this. We're not trying to be intrusive. We're trying to be informative. So please bear with us as we're trying to learn this ourselves and trying to inform you to make sure that you're getting the information you need and that you're understanding where we're coming from in order for this to be successful.
Great, thank you so much. So could we have our final thoughts from our two guests, please? Ed, would you like to start?
Sure. I think campus recreation professionals are just beginning to scratch the surface in terms of digital technology use, and I look forward to partnering with you in April when I visit your conference and are able to talk more specifically and talk with each of you who want to talk about operationally how you do this and various tools and things that we could do to make our lives, in terms of professionally, more meaningful for our students and the experience. And so please know I'm a resource for you, and you can always reach out to me on social networks or via email. Certainly, my information is out there, so you can find me. So I appreciate the opportunity for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Again, I appreciate the opportunity to say my 2 cents about digital technology and social media. For those out there who are naysayers, thinking, I'm not sure if I'm into social media, people who are watching this right now, it's here, it's coming, and it's not going to stop. There's really integrating more technology into what we're doing, and eventually there's going to be a point where you're going to be well behind the times if you're not trying to learn this or trying to integrate this into your programs. We have a lot of recreational departments that are doing a fantastic job integrating that, and because of that, they are finding a lot of success in their wellness and recreation components. So please go out there, make sure that you're doing your homework in terms of the technologies that are available to your department, and learn something about them and see if they fit into your department. You never know what things that you integrate may lead to something more successful or lead to more ideas. So embrace technology. At the same time, do your homework too and make sure you're putting the proper technology in place for your department so you can find maximum success in terms of getting more people participating in your programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott and Ed, for joining us today. Make sure you keep an eye out for our updates for next year's Rec Chats. We will be having one coming up in January, and all of the information regarding that will be released shortly. So until then, my name is Rochelle Harvey. Again, have a fantastic week, and thanks so much for tuning in today in Rec Chat.